Hey, how's it going, captains? Admiral Tori here, and welcome aboard for another World of Warships video on my channel. In today's video, I want to discuss my experience with the brand new USS Enterprise. So currently, the Enterprise has a poor reputation. The community's response to the final product of the Enterprise was great disappointment. The reviewers and the community contributors said that the Enterprise overall was fair, okay, mediocre, and some who were harsh on the Enterprise said that she was just a piece of garbage. Only a few said that the Enterprise was good, or at least decent, and yeah, it's not looking so good. As a result, the NA forums exploded, which isn't a big surprise because I expected this to happen. When you're talking about the highest decorated American warship out of World War II in NA, of course people are going to flip out. And it really does dishearten me to see people went to the extent of posting threads about how useless the wargaming staff was to relay the information about the performance of the Enterprise. And although people strongly believe that the Enterprise has not changed from the beginning, they have changed the Enterprise. They added the AP bomb, and at the same time they also added the exclusive Tier 9, Tier 10 upgrade module to this carrier. This ship has the exclusive power to upgrade her plane's HP or her plane's speed. To me, I want to make this as crisp, clear, clean as possible. The Enterprise isn't a carrier for everyone. And the reason why I say that is because she isn't as straightforward if you don't have any sort of experience with carriers. Which means that judging from the current state of carriers, not many people playing carriers, and I saw a lot of people who said that, oh, the Enterprise would be a perfect opportunity for me to try carriers. Yeah, you just can't send your planes out into the ocean and expect results like all the other class of ships. This class of ship, carriers, requires thinking. Carriers requires decision making. Carriers requires you to understand that the moment you make your decision is going to cost you something and you're hoping that benefit will outweigh the cost. That isn't the case for a lot of people because most people, the way they play battleships, destroyers, and cruisers, they always expect results. And in the case of the Enterprise, it was not going to happen at all. So people, they just blame the wargaming staff, Octavian, Nico Power, because they failed to relay the message to the developers. And it got into a point where it was just toxic. It was pure anti-American propaganda being thrown around. Why does wargaming hate the United States? Money is a problem, this, that, and I'm just mind blown. So I wanted to clear up some misinformation about the Enterprise because there was things that has changed about the Enterprise, although people claim that the developers has never touched the Enterprise, even though I just listed two, the AP bomb and the upgrade module. So the biggest controversy was the Tier 7 planes. Tier 7 planes are going to get shredded or overwhelmed by the Tier 10 AA. And that is true. But with the upgrade module, if you grab the upgrade module which upgrades your torpedo bombers and your dive bombers HP by 15%, the Enterprise Tier 7 planes has the exact, if not very similar, HP survivability of the Lexington. So even if wargaming gave the Enterprise Tier 8 planes, they're going to get shredded regardless. Now the reason why they went with the Tier 9, Tier 10 module rather than just give her the Tier 8 planes was because you have to pick. You either increase the health of your torpedo bombers and your dive bombers or increase the speed but it has less survivability. And at the same time, the biggest reason was because of her fighters. Enterprise, a lot of people, I haven't really heard that much about people talking about Enterprise loadout except they point out that she has a excessive amount of fighters. Enterprise, wargaming from the beginning wanted to build this national flavor of Japanese all about damage with their striking capabilities with their torpedo bombers, and Americans are all about air superiority. Enterprise was designed to be a balanced loadout, which is the 222, but she leans more towards the air superiority, while the Shokaku leans more towards the striking capability. Shokaku isn't full strike. The Lexington is a full strike. You run strike Lexington, you have so many dive bombers. You have, well, I guess fair amount of torpedo bombers, but Lexington, no fighters. That is full damage potential. Shokaku, more versatile. The reason why people like Shokaku is because she has air control with her fighters, and she has decent striking ability. Which means that if you play the Shokaku, and you understand that you cannot send your planes and get results like this, you have to pick your targets correctly, the Enterprise shouldn't be that big of a problem. She plays like the Shokaku, but not exactly because of her fighters. The Shokaku and Enterprise follow two different philosophies. Shokaku follows the philosophy about speed and less armor, while the American philosophy, the Lexington and the Enterprise, have slow planes, but they're more well armored. To put in perspective, Shokaku planes get shredded faster inside the AA bubble, but because she has fast planes, she can get her attack right away, while the American Lexington and the Enterprise, the bombers, actually have very similar speed. They're like off by 3 knots, while the Shokaku is like off, you know, in terms of the advantage of the Shokaku, she has like 20 knots advantage over those American bombers. But you gotta think about it, American bombers were just simply more tankier than the Shokaku's bombers. So overall, if you're arguing that her tier 7 bombers are not going to do so well when it comes to the AA, the Enterprise, even if she gets tier 8 planes, the results would have been the same. But because the Enterprise, you know, in terms of the people's information about the Enterprise, they thought that she's going to do somewhat well as a tier 8 ship. They basically used Enterprise as a perfect example of why she was useless, even though that the Shokaku and the Lexington that's been with us since the beginning were in no different position as the Enterprise in terms of survivability. So saying that her planes are going to get shredded at tier 10, grab the module, you're basically working with tier 8 planes. So the results would have been different. The only difference would have been the fighters, because Lexington fighters are still the best. She has like 2100 HP, while your fighters has 1900 HP. Now, although Enterprise fighter is slower than the, I think, the Lexington by a few knots, and definitely slower than the Shokaku, the Enterprise fighters has same HP as the Shokaku, so the Enterprise does have the advantage over the Shokaku when it comes to the fighters, because you have twice as many fighters as the Shokaku. So if you just do the locking battle, you're just going to outnumber her eventually. So Enterprise has air superiority over the strike Shokaku balance, but the strike Shokaku will have better damage output compared to the Enterprise, although they have similar loadout. And the reason why is because of the Enterprise torpedo drop pattern and the AP bombs and the HE bombs. So yeah, if you think about it, in my opinion, the Enterprise is definitely better than the Lexington. Against the Shokaku, it really depends. In a competitive environment, I believe that the Shokaku will be better because she services her planes faster and her planes fly faster. But in a random environment where there's a lot of players in the game, Enterprise will do better because she has plenty of fighters to use, she has plenty of fighters to sacrifice, and she has plenty of fighters to scout. While Shokaku, you really have to be very picky about your attacks because you just can't send your planes out there. People were, using the brute force tactic. World War I, what did we learn from World War I? The British sent their first wave of men into no man's land. They got mowed down by machine guns, and the general was saying that, oh wow, man, machine guns are pretty powerful. They can mow down 50 people pretty easily. Maybe, we would wait 4 hours later, we can try again. It's just pure luck that the Germans were shooting down our men. Second try, they got mowed down again, same result. That's not gonna work. Maybe the next day, send the men over to no man's land again. They got mowed down. So no matter how hard you try, the results are the same. If you know what's going to happen, why do you keep doing it? Stop being stubborn and try to think outside the box, which is something that not many people have. when you think about, the average carrier player. Most people want results, and this is something that I learned throughout my time. I used the brute force tactic when I began. I mean, everyone had to start somewhere. We don't start as a professional player. I learned my way when I was playing my Taiho and my Essex from the grinding. I learned to adapt to the situation. Rujo Independence is in the same position as, when they face a +2 matchmaking. They go against the Bismarck. They go against the North Carolina. You just can't send your planes in there to expect results. Hiryu, Iowa, Baltimore's, what else? There's plenty of, runes, and Lexington and Shokaku, Montana, Iowa, Hindenburg, Moskvas. It's people were just so, they're not seeing the big picture here. The big picture here is that Enterprise, this is not a problem with the Enterprise. This is a problem with carriers in general. Wargaming a while back universally buffed the entire, ships, like cruisers and battleships. They buffed the anti-air, and as a result, tier 8, tier 6, tier 7 carriers struggle when they get a +2 tier matchmaking. This was a short solution for Wargaming to fix the carrier's placement, but they failed to rework the carriers for so long. Until now, people are realizing that this is a big problem. Well, gee, we hold off on the carrier rework for such a long time, and this is a normal day for a Lexington and Shokaku. But because Enterprise is the more prestigious ship, people were just seeing the horrors, just absolute horrors of what the Enterprise is going to face. So, tier 7 planes, they're just not going to change the results. If Enterprise did have tier 9 planes with the tier 9, tier 10 upgrade module, then that's a different story, but that's not going to happen because you're going to ruin the Lexington and Shokaku balance. You see, yes, there are overpowered ships in this game. There's overpowered cruisers, overpowered battleships, I don't know, it's people's opinion. They are strong, to be more precise. There are strong ships. But with the carriers, you just cannot have a strong carrier right out of the box because the interaction, you can have a very strong battleship, but they have a true counter. You can get HE spammed by a battleship, not H battleships, by a cruiser. Jesus Christ, why did I say battleship? Or get torpedoed by a destroyer, but if you're a strong battleship, you can win against another battleship. Carriers, their first frontline enemy, their first counter is the carrier. So there isn't really a big counter to carriers. The biggest counter to carrier is the carrier itself, the class of carriers. But anti-air is also another source of destroying carriers because although carriers aren't seen in the battle or taken out as easy as the other ships because you can see the ship and you can sink it, carriers has an indirect HP, if I put it this way. And the indirect HP is the planes. If you burn through all your planes, you have no planes, what good is a full HP carrier is in the game? So in most cases, a smart player would wait into the other half of the game and then start sending your planes in and start doing the damage because you want to change the outcome of the game. In the beginning parts of the game where nobody HE spammed the battleships, the A's are still fresh and new, of course you're gonna not gain any results. And yeah, that's worrying to wait the first half of the game, but this isn't just a Enterprise thing. This is a overall carrier problem, and this is something I predicted that when Enterprise, because of her name, she would get the publicity where people would support her, and might have influenced the carrier reworks. Now, the carrier rework. Let's talk about this. The Kaga and the Enterprise. When I read the article, in green letters, they said that the Enterprise, although it was officially released with the Kaga in green letters in the article, the ship is subject to change, which means that although the ship is a final product, when they say the stats are subject to change, I'm guessing that the rework is still in the progress. But what really bothers me is that Wargaming hasn't really said anything about the rework that much. And if you seriously try and justify that buying the ship will help them do better with the rework, that is very dirty play by Wargaming. I shouldn't buy a ship just to test these new gimmicky things. So let's talk about the Torpedo Bombers, because that's the other thing that people were upset with. In this game, if you play carriers, there are two methods of Torpedo Bombers. And we're going to talk about the Japanese because the Americans only have one method because they only got one squad of Torpedo Bombers. With the Japanese, you can do an anvil and hammer attack, which means that you cross drop from one side of the ship and the other side, and you basically trap them. The other tactic is to stack your torpedo bombers and drop in one direction, which the Japanese does well. Enterprise, she has a huge gap, and this upsets a lot of people because even a battleship can dodge that gap. But I felt that Wargaming has done a very clever trick with the Enterprise that a lot of people missed out on. And this is something I looked at it, and I didn't have the power to use the Enterprise, but I felt that I can use this tactic. It might be a good tactic. What Wargaming has just basically did was that they engineered a dirt technique, and you can see this dirt technique in the Armada video. Basically, you cannot just drop in one direction. The anvil and hammer attack works just fine with the Enterprise, in my opinion. But with the one direction, if you stack your torpedo bomber and drop in one side of the ship, like a Japanese carrier, because Japanese carriers converges, that's what you should be doing. That's not going to work with an Enterprise because it's pretty easy to thread through the gap, which upsets people. But this third new tactic that they just added was that you can crisscross drop one side, and as a result it creates a X pattern, and anyone who's in the path of this wide area is guaranteed to get hit by a torpedo. While the Japanese convergence drop, you can actually dodge that drop at times, while this, although is not as dense because of how widespread they are, this guarantees a hit in almost every situation if you do it correctly. Sometimes I screw it up, but I'm trying to get used to it. But you will notice that in this game, I'm just guaranteed to hit the ship because the ship just looking left and right is like, oh my gosh, where should I thread the needle? You can't thread the needle at all because you're going to have to take damage whether you're on this side of this, this torpedo wave or that side. And that is the third new technique that Wargaming was clever with. So the torpedoes weren't designed like the Japanese. They weren't designed to do a lot of damage. But a decent drop will get you 6 torpedo hits, 4 to 6. And you think about it, Lexington, she has 6 torpedoes, and that's the most. So at the end of the day, you're basically working with a Lexington torpedo bomber, but with 2 squadrons, and that's much more flexible because you're given 3 different techniques, while Lexington only has 1 technique, which is just drop one side, right? Because she only has 1 torpedo bomber. So although you don't do as much damage as the Japanese, because the Japanese converges, they're much more dense and they're not as widespread, if you apply the correct technique with the Enterprise, you cross drop it, you basically guarantee damage if you do it properly. If you approach your target before the AA goes off, which is another thing where people were applying the brute force. I was seeing Enterprise players that most likely have never played carrier set up their attack inside the AA bubble. The approach angle was awful. They came from the stern. And yeah, I done plenty of carrier videos. I keep telling you guys, do not attack the enemy. Do not commit to the attack until you have the right angle. Same thing as a sniper. You just don't fire at your target until you get the correct windage, the correct elevation, and then the correct position to fire at your target. It takes a lot of thinking. That is why sniping in terms of the military has a lot of discipline and training. Enterprise requires a lot of discipline. If you play Shokaku, you understand this discipline pretty well. Now, I've seen people who play only American carriers who have never played Japanese carriers, and the funny thing is that most of these people were saying that Japanese carriers were simply overpowered because of their flexibility. Well, Enterprise is actually the same. She's very similar. She might not have the servicing time like the Shokaku, but the way you play the Enterprise is similar to the Shokaku. So if you play the Shokaku, you've been to the tier 10 matchmaking, you understand how to deal with it, Enterprise shouldn't be that great of a disappointment. But since she is such a prestigious ship, and people expect her to be overpowered, which is funny because people are fighting that ship shouldn't be overpowered when it comes to premium ship, she was just okay. She was just balanced to most people. And to me, I really do like it. I really do like the Enterprise. But I felt that to justify, recommendation, you have to have tier 7 and tier 8 Japanese experience. If you don't have it, if you have at least a tier 7 experience on the American, you might struggle because you're learning something new, but the Enterprise should be a solid ship. Is she a competitive ship? Yes, she is. She is definitely competitive against the Shokaku. She's better than the Lexington in my opinion because she's more versatile. If you face a strike Lexington which has no fighter, you as the Enterprise will have the advantage because you get to shoot down her planes because you have the fighters and you have torpedo bombers and dive bombers. Air superiority Lexington. She doesn't have torpedo bombers, so she's going to lack damage. But with the Enterprise, although the Lexington air superiority is expected to win because of her tier 8 Corsairs are going to outclass your Wildcats, you have a ton of Wildcats to sacrifice. Just sacrifice your Wildcats, get a strike through, and you will definitely do more damage than an air superiority Lexington. So when it comes to facing air superior Lexington, you feel like a strike ship. When you're facing a strike Lexington, you feel like you're a strike ship and a air superiority ship with the Enterprise. So Enterprise is just simply better than Lexington in my opinion. Even though I kind of have more fun moments with the Lexington strike loadout when things go right, because if you face another carrier player who doesn't know how to use fighters, or it just happens to be a Lexington who doesn't have any planes that can counter your planes, fighters. With the Shokaku, with your balanced loadout, mainly you will face 222 Shokakus, the balanced Shokaku, strike Shokaku. The Enterprise might not have the striking capabilities with the torpedo bombers, but this is where the AP bombs come in. Enterprise AP bombs was a great idea. The AP bombs was a great idea, but poorly executed. This is something that I don't like about the Enterprise, not because of the way, as a ship to play in terms of their performance, but how poorly executed that Wargaming used the AP bombs. AP bombs are extreme, and this is something I am totally against. Depending on the target, if you face a Montana, you're just going to get, like, with the AP bombs, at best 15k, or even the Yamato. But when you face something like the Friedrich der Grosser, you get 50k, 40k. Bismarck, you can one-shot the Bismarck at times. And this is, in terms of carrier balance, this is stupid. I don't know why they had this, like I said, this great idea, but poorly executed. The problem with this is that there's no middle ground, and the damage is just too extreme. Because if you face, for instance, let's face all the battleship with great deck armor, your AP bombs are useless. But what happens if you face all the battleships that have, weak deck armor like Bismarcks? Then your AP bombs just destroy and you're expected to have a perfect game. And this is something that I just don't understand what were they thinking. This shouldn't be in the game because, let's face it, I see a Magi, I see a Bismarck. And if I was in the Magi, I should be happy because that Enterprise is going to pick that Bismarck if he was smart enough. She's just going to pick the Bismarck. You're going to double your damage. Even like the smallest hit on the Bismarck can take a lot of damage out of that ship. And how would that other player feel on the receiving end? It's just, you're bullying ships that that are weak. And what I wanted was Wargaming to have some kind of 10 to 30k range to be more reasonable, where you face ships that have great deck armor, so you might do like 10 to 13k. Ships that are average, you do 15 to 20k, and ships that are vulnerable, maybe 30k, but add some little bit RNG that the ship that would take a lot of damage will probably take damage at times like 20k, but not as low as 10k because they just vulnerable. That is what I wanted with the AP bombs, but Wargaming, I feel like they added this feature where it's so one-trick pony that it's a unique aspect when they see somebody drop the AP bomb on the Fuso and delete it. It's just not fair. I don't understand this. If you have ever played a mobile game, competitive shooter game, any competitive games, they don't have this type of thing. And yes, World of Warship isn't a competitive esport game, but it's the idea of balance, and there's no middle ground with this particular mechanic. So yeah, although Enterprise torpedoes aren't as competitive as the Shokaku, you still have the AP bombs, which means that at times you would definitely outclass the Shokaku's damage because of those AP bombs, but it depends on what you're dealing with. So AP bombs was a no-go for me. I tried to use HE bombs. I was hoping that they will make the HE bombs more tighter, but AP bomb is the way to go because you just gotta depend on matchmaking, because HE, the RNG is just so awful to play on American carriers in general, which is why Strike Lexington can get away with it because she has 3 we call it 3 squadrons. At the same time, these are 1,000-pound bombs. So AP bombs is the way to go. Don't bother with HE. And you would say that, oh, well, how about HE? You can take out destroyers and cruisers. Well, honestly, it's really hard, even with the most perfect manual drop on a destroyer or a cruiser, they're just going to miss. And it takes like 3 to 5 minutes, to get an airstrike going. I felt that people were blaming the Enterprise because she was a weak ship, but in reality, the problem really sourced to carriers in general. This isn't new news. Tier 8 has always struggled against Tier 10 AA, but because Enterprise gets the publicity, people witness the horrors of what it's like to play carriers. This is something I had to deal with all the time, and eventually I learned to play carriers. I have done videos. I did the Hear You video. I showed you guys. So, yeah, I would say the safest, if I were to, someone asked me, how's the Enterprise? Should I get the Enterprise? The safest option would have been not to get it because the price was steep. I personally would not buy the Enterprise right now. I was going to go for a second round, but due to my excitement and at the same time, I'm sure that a lot of you guys expected me to drop the money on this one. So I took the bullet, dropped it. This is the third most expensive ship I have ever purchased, which is something that in terms of people who are angry about Enterprise with Wargaming, with my personal feeling about Wargaming, I felt that they overpriced the Enterprise big time. Big time. This ship was $60. Second place was $80 for the Tirpitz, I believe, and first place was the Missouri. And, I saw the Alabama. Alabama was like $55. I know it's like $5 difference, but the point is, I felt that, where did they get the $60 money from? Like, where did they get this idea of charging this ship at $60? Prince Eugen was $58, I believe. But it was pretty clear that, you think about highest decorated ship. And even if the ship was bad to most people, Wargaming knew that small population of carrier players, they're going to have to make some sort of cash out of this Enterprise. So if the small population, if it was a lot of people who play carriers, I bet it would have been cheaper. But since it's small, I'm basically paying for a second person with that extra $5. I felt that they overpriced Enterprise big time, and that was my personal dilemma with Enterprise. It was basically I paid $60 for the name, and call me idiot on it, but although it was $60 for a name when I was playing the Enterprise, I actually had a delight with her because she's currently the only American carrier on my port that feels solid, very solid. You play air superiority, you just don't have the damage. You play strike American carriers, you don't have the air power. I mean, Saipan would have been the other choice, but Saipan doesn't, appeal to me. I have the Kaga already, and people just couldn't stop comparing the Kaga with the Enterprise. Why does Kaga get the damage with the torpedoes while the Enterprise gets the fighters? The answer was simple. Enterprise is American flavor, air superiority. Japanese Kaga was the damage. And what also convinced Wargaming to do the fighter loadout was because of people's overall disagreement with how carriers are in the game. They just hate how much damage carriers were doing in the game. So what Wargaming thought would be a great idea was force us with this one and only loadout to play air superiority, because this, although it is a balanced loadout, it leans towards air superiority. It definitely leans towards air superiority. And when I saw the reviews where people were saying that they weren't impressed with the damage, I felt that they were forcing themselves to force an air superiority loadout to do well with damage, even though air superiority was designed to shoot down planes rather than damage. But then again, it's not like at all has been lost. Definitely not, because Enterprise is still a solid ship to me. But the skill ceiling, the skill level is really high. Requires you to understand. You can't just pick it up. I mean, I can pick up a tier 8 cruiser, and I have never played cruiser, but I understand how to shoot a gun because I've been playing battleships, right? I have no, I don't have to understand it. It doesn't take that much to understand to play a cruiser. Maybe 50 games, and I figure out how cruisers play. Angle, avoid being front lines, and yeah, eventually you'll figure out. Destroyers, you learn for the first several games that you're not supposed to go in by yourself, and you understand which ship has radar. Enterprise, you pick it up and you have never played carriers. It's going to be hell. And not only that, people are going to yell at you because, you know, how much influence that carriers has in the game is pretty big. So if you're not doing your job correctly, you're going to suffer big time on the Enterprise, and you're just going to have that buyer's remorse. So if you have some sort of interest in the Enterprise, stop right there and work on carriers first until you feel like you're confident. At least tier 7. Japanese. Recommend Japanese first. At least tier 7. If you like carrier gameplay, then the second time when Enterprise comes around, hopefully it will be a lower price at the same time, you're ready to play the Enterprise. But mainly, I want to be more safe about it. At least get tier 8 Shokaku so you can understand what it's like to play the Shokaku in a tier 10 matchmaking. I mean, you know, +2 matchmaking, Ryujo Independence gotta deal with North Carolina. The Hiryu gotta deal with Iowa. The Enterprise gotta deal with Montana. It's not new, guys. It's definitely not new. And like I said, people were tearing the community apart, calling the wargaming staff. These are the people who host events. These are the people who orchestrate guides and spread information, start the Reddits, and all sorts of cool stuff. And just like that, one ship, a virtual pixel ship, ruined it all. I felt that mainly NA forums, because I guess it's not a surprise. I felt that a lot of people were spoiled about this. People wanted the ship to be overpowered, even though we were stressing that overpowered pretty much shouldn't be a thing. It should be something obtained like the Black or the Flint. But I you know, to me, I play ships for the sake of fun, not because of how well they do, but they're unique. And in this case, the Enterprise is unique because she has a balanced loadout for a USN carrier. But sometimes I play them for the name, and that's the price I pay. But I am satisfied with the Enterprise. Definitely not satisfied with the price, but I just couldn't wait. So if you have any questions about the Enterprise, if you're still on the line, I would safely say that hold off on it. If you're on the line, just hold off on it. If you're convinced about the Enterprise, you know, in terms of the name, you just love the ship the way she looks, because I adore ships. I just adore looking at ships. The reason why I do intros with carriers where they show the carriers, you know, sailing in, all sorts of cutscenes, all sorts of stuff, while I don't do it on the battleship at times or cruisers, was because you just don't get the opportunity to savor the beauty of carriers, because most of the time you're going to be looking on the map, which is why I spend the time to do these intros for carriers, because I want people to look at carriers, and some people were inspired to play carriers because of the way they look. That was me. I was inspired to play this carrier because of the look, or carriers in general. And if you're looking for a performance ship, yeah, Enterprise is not a choice. Definitely not a choice. You're better off getting something else like the Tirpitz, or, you know, if you're thinking about performance, playing the game, just care about the game. Yeah, don't care about Enterprise. Just don't even touch her. I mean, you might as well get something like Shokaku if you want something similar to Enterprise. Yeah, that is my overall impression. I felt that it was not a good feeling at all. It was definitely not a good feeling to see the forums like this. I felt like, you know, I don't like what Wargaming has done with the marketing, with the bundles and all sorts of stuff. That's my dilemma. But when you take it to the point where you blame the stats because of a ship, you know, they could have easily changed the ship name to Yorktown. They could just name it Yorktown, and it wouldn't be that big of a problem. Maybe a small problem, but not that big. Can you just believe that? But because Enterprise being the prestigious ship, I mean, yeah, most of the Americans, like the strong Americans, the patriotic one who were on the forum saying that this is anti-American, disgrace to the American Navy. If you truly love the Enterprise, you shouldn't at all base your love in this game. A dedicated person would become a historian. A dedicated person would research, interview, talk about the ship, teach about the ship, do videos about the ship, not play the ship in this game. This is a video game. This is a virtual ship. This is pixel. We shouldn't be viewing these ships as the means of learning the ship. To truly understand the ship, to truly love the ship, is really to read books about them. And we do have historians in World War II who love the ships to death. And I myself, although, you know, I talk about history and play this game, my inspiration from all these different ships that I play comes from this game. Definitely comes from this game. I learned about the Warspite, I learned about the Missouri, I learned about this and that, Japanese naval doctrine. I learned a lot from this game. But I definitely don't take my, you know, in terms of respecting these particular knowledge from this game for sure. I just play the game for fun, and learn these ships are just a side thing. But if you truly love the ship, do not have this game as a means to represent the ship's honor. Definitely does not. Definitely a video game. Just think about it. Video game representing the honor of a war that a lot of people lost their lives in. The best way to honor a war has always been to read the stories, listen to people who had family members who fought in the war. And truly, the ultimate goal is to learn why we were in this war. Why did the people aboard the Enterprise sacrifice their life for, in terms of the means of the United States of America? But in military, the number one goal has always been to sacrifice your life for your own country. Universally said, over history. I'm trying to be more universal with what I'm saying here, because I know my viewers aren't all Americans, and I always try to avoid the patriotic feel, which is why I put as much, although I am American, I put as much attention in the war fight with all the other nations. With the Enterprise, I look into Yamato, I look at all these ships. They all offer a story, even if a ship that wasn't as prestigious as the Enterprise or any other ship. They all have their own stories to tell, unique ones. I mean, there's destroyers. There's a lot of people know that the Japanese weren't nice to the POWs, but that just tells part of the story. But there was one destroyer captain who saved several men from the opposite side because he was strongly against the idea of executing POWs. JFK was a PT boat, got run over, and he had to survive an island. I don't remember the story, but that's another story. There's millions of stories. There's a story of a American who was escorted by a German ace pilot. I believe he was an ace. He was escorted by his opponent because the opponent had sympathy for him. The opponent, the German. I mean, we think of Germany as like the greatest enemy in World War II, but a lot of people are into the political aspects. But if you look in these small stories, that is what makes these type of things stick out. It's not the game, it's the stories, guys. So if you try to justify that this is a disgrace to the US Navy, you're basically trying to justify that this game should be honorable to military history, when in reality it's just the theme. It shouldn't be used as a means to represent history at all. I doubt I see people TK people in World War II. I mean, come on now. Or people yell in the radio saying that you're a noob, or tell the enemy team that you sunk my ship, but you're still garbage next time. No, war is war, and please don't put war with the game. But the game being inspired of war, we can definitely discuss about the history, and I don't mind doing that. Definitely do not mind doing that. So aside from that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time on World of Warships.